Good morning. It is Tuesday, October 23rd, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. So, migration and rent control. How are the two related? What we've got going on now, coming up north in through Mexico, is a caravan. It's been described as a caravan of several thousand people coming to try to enter the United States of America, I guess legally, illegally, or otherwise. And they have been referred to, and was referred to by a substitute host on the Hugh Hewitt show this morning, as migrants. And it really irritates me to no end to hear conservatives using left-wing phrases like that as though they are legitimate. These folks are not migrants. They do not migrate because they're human beings. Human beings don't migrate. Human beings emigrate or immigrate. So that's because there is such thing as property. Human beings own property, have private property. They have private property because they have an expectation of privacy. Animals don't own property. They have no expectation of privacy, and therefore they migrate. They just wander around looking for food and water, primarily. So the left wants to emphasize these folks as migrants to de-emphasize, as a way of de-emphasizing private property. Now, the way this works is that if they can influence our culture, they can influence our politics. Because if you buy into the idea of people as migrants and you refuse to acknowledge that they are any different or any different than an animal, that they have any expectation to privacy, that they have any need, therefore, for private property, then when there is a ballot measure that comes up, as there is here in California, for rent control, statewide rent control, how can you say no? Okay, rent control presumes that all property is owned in common. False. It is false. I go out and I buy a house. I rent an apartment. That is mine. That is my property. I have an expectation of privacy, and I have rights as a property owner, even so much as a renter. If I'm renting, the landlord can't just come wandering into my legally rented apartment or house. Okay, and if I buy a piece of property, the state doesn't get to say, oh, that's fine, Ron, you get to pay taxes on that property, you get to pay insurance, you get to pay the mortgage on that property, but we're going to tell you how to use that property, how to dispose of that property. Wrong. Doesn't work that way. Belongs to me, I decide. But if I'm somebody who, by even default, thinks that, wow, there really is no such thing as private property, everything is really basically owned in common, even if I'm paying rent, even if I am paying a mortgage, it doesn't really belong to me, it sort of belongs to everybody. Then when the politicians say, hey, I got a great idea, rent control, what are you going to say? No? Of course not. You're going to say yes to rent control. You're going to say, well, it makes perfect sense. We all own this property in common, and so therefore we have the right to set rents in common, together. But it's false. It's not true. But you've been influenced by American counterculture, by something, one word, by one word, influences you, and that is migrants. By using and accepting the word migrant, eventually you're going to go ahead and accept rent control. Okay, there's a saying in program: if you hang around a barber shop long enough, sooner or later you're going to get a haircut. Okay, it's the same thing. If you start thinking like a lefty, sooner or later you're going to start acting like a lefty. Okay, there may be people out there that say, well, I can do what I want. If I want to wear a Che Guevara t-shirt because I think it looks cool, but I'm going to vote for conservatives, well, there's nothing wrong with that. Is there? Yes, there is, because you have to make up your mind at some point. Because the farther left you're going to go culturally, the farther left you're going to go politically. So, again, the politics in this country hasn't changed for nothing. And it hasn't changed because, Democrats have been running Congress for a long time, or because the Republicans have been running the show for a long time. There's a lot of people like Rush Limbaugh that think that all we have to do is vote in the right people and everything will be okay. No, it won't. No, it will not. And that's something to keep in mind. So, in a minute, when we come back, I'm going to be playing a little bit of the I've got a app from the Hugh Hewitt show. So I'm going to play a little bit of that and make some commentary when we come back. And thank you very much. Welcome back. And here's a little clip from the Hugh Hewitt show.
Aaron Marks is CEO.
Grom Social is a multimedia technology platform that entertains children in a safe environment. We teach kids how to be good digital citizens, how to use the internet properly. We also help them deal with bullies, balance in life, good health and fitness, exercise, family time.
Grom Social is for kids, but the company is also behind...
Looks like they're in a commercial. So let me get this wired up and be right back in a minute. Okay, I think we're done with the commercials. Back to Hugh Hewitt.
Today after his rally in Pittsburgh last night, boy, that was a tough one, rallying against the president. No, it was a Battleground Talkers Tour event in Pittsburgh, obviously, with Hugh and colleagues, Michael Medved and others. I'm sure it was a great event, but Hugh had that deal in Pittsburgh while battling the illness that took his voice from him yesterday, so I'm very happy to be sitting in for him today from the PainFreeReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420, The Answer in Cleveland. So the president rallied last night, as mentioned, for Ted Cruz, but also rallying for himself and for just the conservative Republican vision in this country and why it's so important, so integral for the Republicans to not only hold on to, but maybe expand their majority in the United States Senate, but also to try to hold off the Democrats, whether it be a wave or a trickle. We cannot let them, and the president says, of course, take over the House. We cannot deal with Speaker Pelosi. We cannot deal with Democrat chairholders, chairpersons of various committees, which will wipe out important investigations that are ongoing right now, which will start new investigations that will be politically motivated and more. So, the president is doing everything he can. I said before the break, his energy level is absolutely unmatched. I say that not to just be, overly complimentary of the leader of my party, but quite honestly, President Trump and his ability at his age to continue to turn out these performances and this high level of energy to try to rally people for, congressional votes for Republicans is simply amazing. You've never seen it before. President Reagan didn't do this. President Bush 1 or Bush 2 didn't do this. You can go back further than that. Nobody does this. But the president is just continuing to make this worldwide, or not worldwide, but nationwide tour of rallies in order to support Republicans. If they do not win, I'm going to say something about President Trump that needs to be said, because he was mocked for this in some circles a few weeks ago when he said that if we don't win the House or maintain control of the House, don't blame me. And some people mocked him for it and said, oh, Trump's trying to avoid responsibility, when clearly if voters turn against Republicans, it's going to be a repudiation of Trump. What the president meant was, and I think last night is another great example of, is it's not for my lack of effort. Don't blame me. I am going around and I am doing everything I can to rally support for people to continue to enact the vision, the agenda that was laid out in 2016 when I ran for office. I ran for office and said I would do A, B, C, D, and all the way through to Z, and I am doing it, but some of it I cannot do because of congressional obstruction. And I am doing everything I can to support that Congress and to make sure that we remove the obstructionists. And that would mean the Democrats. And we have to not only, like I said, hold on, but hopefully grow. If it doesn't happen, if we lose the 23 to 27 or 30 seats or whatever it is that is the average, and this is what happens in the midterm election, the opposite party of who's in the White House loses that number of seats in virtually every midterm election in modern American history, political history. This would not be a repudiation of Trump. It would be a direct, following of historical tradition, just in terms of voter norms. If he is able to buck those trends, if he is able to stop that wave from happening, it would be one of the most amazing accomplishments in modern political history. It just would. He would be stopping something from happening which is expected of the minority party, which is to gain that number of seats. If he somehow heads it off, not only should he be given all of the praise in the world for his ability to rally voters in the face of incessant negativity from the media about his own party to keep control, but he would be bucking political history in the same way that he bucked it when he won the office of president in the first place. It would just...
Okay, so give you a little bit of a taste there. And what the host was saying, and where he's wrong, but what he failed to say, and the reason he's wrong, is that the reason that off-year elections have a tendency to go to the party out of power is studies have shown, at least according to Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, that the party that's in power, their voters have a tendency to be complacent. They got what they wanted out of the presidential election, so they have a tendency to go, Hugh, well, I don't need to vote. I got what I wanted. So the other side is more motivated. Their voters turn out, more of their voters turn out, and that's how you end up losing seats, how the party in power ends up losing seats. It doesn't just happen by tradition. Okay, so that being said, then when President Trump says if doesn't happen, don't blame me, maybe not, because I mean what he's trying to do and what all the Republicans are trying to do is make sure they motivate the base. Now, I think also what Donald Trump is doing, or President Trump is doing, is taking advantage of momentum that the Kavanaugh hearings have supposedly, again, if you listen to Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and agree with them, then the Kavanaugh hearings and the polls that have been conducted that Hannity and Limbaugh have reported on are showing that that Republicans around the country are motivated. They're motivated to go to the polls. They're offended by the way that Justice Kavanaugh was treated during the confirmation process, and that's reflected in polls that Democrats that were ahead in certain races are now even. Races that were tight, in which the Republican and the Democrat were neck and neck, the Democrat is finding that they are losing. So that Donald Trump and others now are going to take advantage of that. They see that, hey, it seems that Republican voters are motivated, so I'm going to get out on the campaign trail and try to keep that momentum going. So the other thing to be said about this, about polls and surveys, is that they've been wrong so often. Donald Trump is proof of that. Donald Trump was written off from the time he announced his candidacy until the election night. He was just written off. There's no possible way he could win. It's a joke. He should give up, et cetera, et cetera. And, of course, now he's president of the United States. And a lot of that is because of the way the polls or surveys are done. They don't just go out and pick people randomly. They go out and weigh. They'll put more Democrats or more Republicans or more independents in the mix, depending on, I don't know what it depends on. But the point is that they're skewed, that they're deliberately skewed, supposedly for objective or scientific reasons. So, but the point is, you can't trust them. They're not straightforward at all. They're not a representative sampling in that, anyhow, if in terms of the numbers of people, and they're not representative in terms of actually being fair. If you want to go out and get, say, a third independents, a third Republicans, and a third Democrat, and going out and then get 1,000 of those people, it might give you a little bit of a snapshot as to the direction, the way things are shaping up. But that's not the way they do it. They're going to skew it like they did with Trump, like they've done in previous elections, where they will sample more Democrats than Republicans, and then they're shocked and surprised when the Republicans win. And a lot of that reason I think that they are weighting it with more Democrats than Republicans is because they're using polls and surveys not as a reflection of reality, but as a method of shaping reality. So, back in a minute. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back. And right now I'm going to be reading from the Ayn Rand lexicon, and today's concept is compassion. I regard compassion as proper only toward those who are innocent victims, but not toward those who are morally guilty. If one feels compassion for the victims of a concentration camp, one cannot feel it for the torturers. If one does feel compassion for the torturers, it is an act of moral treason toward the victims. And I'm going to go right into, instead of taking a break since that was a short one, I'm going to go right, let's try that again, go right to House and Philosophy, Everybody Lies. And the section on this particular chapter is called Results Are What Matters. It's probably not surprising that given House's dubious attitude toward the usefulness of morality in general, this is, after all, the man who bribed and blackmailed a transplant surgeon into performing a liver transplant, he is generally not concerned with the finer points of moral judgment. Given that patients' lives are at stake, what matters are results. In the Season 1 episode, 3 Stories, House lectures to a group of medical students and asks them what they would do with a particular snakebite victim who is almost just killed by giving the wrong antivenom. Time is running out for the victim. Do they try giving him another antivenom, hoping it is the right one and knowing the wrong one might indeed kill him this time? Do they search the victim's farm again, hoping to find the snake that bit him so they can identify the correct antivenom without risking using a wrong one, knowing that the patient may die by the time they find the snake? One of the students notes that choosing the wrong option will probably kill the patient, and House nods. The class ends up split down the middle in their choice. Another one of the students then concludes horrified, "Half of us killed him, and half of him just saved his life." House agrees. A third student begins to protest that they cannot be blamed for killing the patient, thus demonstrating his belief in the control principle. Since it was beyond their control to know what the correct option would be at the time of their decision, they should not be responsible. House responds, quote, I'm sure this goes against everything you've been taught, but right and wrong do exist. Just because you don't know what the right answer is, maybe there's even no way you could know what the right answer is, doesn't make your answer right or even okay. It's much simpler than that. It's just plain wrong, unquote. The judge of correctness is outcome. It doesn't matter what their intentions were. The control principle is wrong, according to House. In the Season 2 episode, The Mistake, Chase fails to ask a patient a key question after he is distracted by the news of his father's death, and this failure leads down the line to the patient's death. When Chase tries to protest that it is just a little mistake, and thus not very blameworthy, House responds, quote, mistakes are as serious as the results they cause, unquote. Had the patient not died, the mistake would have been less serious. It would indeed have been a simple failure to ask a particular follow-up question rather than grounds for a disciplinary hearing and a medical malpractice and negligence suit. The action in either case is the same, failure to ask a question. Because the patient died, however, Chase committed a serious error, and only the mitigating factor of having just learned of his father's death is ultimately able to excuse him, so that all he receives is a week's suspension and a letter in his permanent file. The idea that unintended or unforeseen consequences of an action determine whether the agent will be in serious trouble or not can be frightening. The kind of moral luck involved here is called resultant luck. We can mitigate resultant luck somewhat by attempting to control for as many factors as we can, much as House controls for the probability of his patients being deceitful by holding everybody lies as a firm rule, but ultimately much is beyond our control. House's team will need to take risks and try treatments that may not work, because ultimately they are expected to do something rather than nothing. And that's not quite correct, because the first rule in medicine is thou shalt do no harm. So if your choice is between doing something that you have a reasonable expectation is going to harm somebody, in this case administering an anti-venom that may well kill the patient, or doing nothing, or in this case the corollary of doing nothing, which is looking for more information, i.e. trying to find the snake, you got to go find the snake. There's no doubt about that. Okay, you cannot play roulette with your patients' lives. Okay. Now, the other thing that was really important. Let's see. Where is he here? Blah 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 blah. Let's see. House response. Let's see. Here it goes. It's just plain wrong. The judge of correctness is outcome. It doesn't matter what their intentions were. The control principle is wrong, according to House. And when you have that attitude, that's called pragmatism. Okay, it's a philosophical theory that posits exactly that the rightness or wrongness of an act is judged by its results. If you go out and you do something and it results in saving a life, you are right. If you do something and it results in somebody's death, you are wrong. Just that simple. And it's not that simple. For instance, because what you're dealing with here is right is right, wrong is wrong. Now, if I go out, because what we're doing here is conflating justice with ethics. Okay, so what we're saying is, because there's two separate issues here always, and this is one of the favorite tactics of the left, is to try to conflate the two in order to make it seem as though ethics either doesn't exist or ethical standards are impossible to attain or maintain. If you have two people that rob or burglarize a bakery, okay, and one of them does it because they're feeding their family, the other one does it to feed a drug habit. They're going to burglarize the bakery so they can sell things so they can get heroin. And the other one is doing it because he literally needs bread to feed his family. Are they wrong? Yes, both of them. Both of them are equally wrong, equally immoral for what they did. Theft is wrong, universally, for everybody, everywhere, at all times. Okay, it was wrong 2,000 years ago. It'll be wrong 2,000 years from now. And it's wrong for the person that's trying to feed his family. It's wrong for the person that's doing it for profit. Now, the issue after that is justice. Justice is about what is it that the individual should expect from society. What does society expect from the individual? And in this particular case, what is it that is just in terms of punishment? Should they be treated the same? They committed the same offense, but their motives are important in terms of what they deserve. The person that's feeding his family maybe gets a slap on the wrist. The person that's doing it for profit may end up doing jail time. And that's appropriate. But that's how you deal with the issue of motive. Motive goes to justice. The rightness or the wrongness of the act is irrespective of justice. Okay, if you look at whatever the guideline is, in this particular case with medicine, you're looking at the Hippocratic Oath. And the first thing of the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm. Okay, so that means if you have to let the patient, you just try to make the patient comfortable. You know that the patient is going to die. There's nothing you can do about it. You're not going to be able to save him in time. Then you do what you can to make the patient comfortable, and that's that. But you don't take any type of action just because you think you have to do something. No. Again, the rule is do no harm. So if you're going to, giving them an anti-venom is got a 50-50 chance of killing them, you don't take that risk. Go out, look for the snake. If the patient dies in the meantime, that's the way it is. You made the right decision. So, and going ahead if you go ahead and make the wrong decision and you go ahead and inject him with the antivenom, then all you can expect is what kind of punishment should I receive? Okay, because if you did the wrong thing and you save his life, well, obviously you're not going to get the same punishment. Maybe then, like Chase, you end up with a reprimand, a letter in your file. But if the patient dies, then maybe you end up with a lawsuit. And a lot of this, again, these are questions that they're asking as though they're brand new. They're not brand new. They've been dealt with thousands of years ago. 2,000 years ago, Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates, among others, dealt with these very same issues. So, now I'm going to go into, I'm not going to take a break. I'm going to go right into the philosophy. Where is it? There it is. Breaking Bad and philosophy, and what is it? Chemicals. Chemicals or life, or something like that. So this is chapter 2, Heisenberg's Uncertainty Confession. Heisenberg was an interesting name for that Walter White, he took as a pseudonym for his, being this drug character. Heisenberg was a man that came up with something called the uncertainty principle. And the idea is that the more you study something, the less clear it becomes. And that's kind of a rough overstatement of what the principle is. But again, I think that was Heisenberg, when the writers put Heisenberg in there, I think it was, again, a little bit of a deliberate kind of a poetic device, so to speak. Darrell J. Murphy. I had prayed to you, and that's the name of the chapter, but Heisenberg's Uncertainty Confession, and then it says Darrell J. Murphy. I had prayed to you for chastity, and you said, give me chastity and continence, but not yet. St. Augustine's Confessions, Book 8, Chapter 7. His respirator keeps him safe from the toxic mists of hydrochloric acids that saturate the air around him, but it doesn't block the acrid tang of iron and salt from percolating into his nose. It's the smell of blood, and he can taste it in the very back of his throat. The taste triggers a thought he can't bury. This is what Emilio tastes like. This is what murder tastes like. Walter White, high school chemistry teacher turned methamphetamine chef extraordinaire, killed Emilio days before, but it's only now that he's wrist deep in the chemical soup of his victim that Walt is seized by the guilt of his actions. As he shovels another scoop of Emilio slurry into a bucket, Walt remembers a moment poetically relevant to his present. In his memory, Walt and Gretchen, a former girlfriend, are studying the chemical composition of the human body. Hydrogen, 63%, oxygen, 26%, carbon, 9%, nitrogen, 1.25%, calcium, 0.25, iron, sodium, phosphorus, and the total is 99.88 plus percent. Apparently, that's everything. What about the rest? Gretchen has a suggestion. What about the soul? She asks. But for Walt, a man of science, the soul is something completely foreign to his way of thinking. There's nothing but chemistry here, Walt whispers to Gretchen, dismissing her suggestion. Walt's flat dismissal, however, doesn't explain the missing amount in, the 0.11958% discrepancy the couple has uncovered. It is this 0.11958% missing from the Emilio slurry that will prove to be of the greatest philosophical significance. Soul, choice, and responsibility. Walt's dismissal of the idea of the soul is consistent with what philosophy calls a materialist point of view, and Walt is a materialist. In the pilot episode, he expresses materialism quite clearly in his classroom. Chemistry is a study of matter, electrons. They change their energy levels. Molecules change their bonds. Elements, they combine and change into compounds. And that's all of life. For a materialist like Walt, chemistry and matter is all of life. There's nothing more to understand when it comes to life in the world, because everything that does or could ever happen, including your choice to read this book, can be explained according to the rules that govern the behavior of the chemicals things are made of. Strict materialists believe that no one chooses to break bad. Rather, a series of chemical reactions in your body, combined with chemical interactions between the body and the environment, dictate your actions. These same chemical interactions trigger the feeling you might have that you chose to break bad. This might be the sort of perspective that you would want to have if you were ever shoveling the soupy mess of your murder victim into a toilet. If you think about the world and your behavior strictly in terms of the rules that govern the behavior of your chemical components, you might be able to convince yourself that you didn't decide to kill anyone, that it wasn't your will but the laws of nature that took the life recently ended. This point of view allows you to believe that you do not choose to break bad, rather bad and evil just happen. If, however, chemistry is only able to account for 99.88042% of the human body, then this 0.111958% discrepancy represents a tiny but important hole in the materialist point of view. Gretchen's suggestion that this hole is filled by the soul expresses the sort of idea that's cancerous to materialism. It leaves open the possibility that there's something in the world that can't be accounted for by or doesn't obey the laws of chemistry. And if each person is partially composed of something that doesn't obey the laws of chemistry, then maybe each person is responsible for his or her own actions. Not only does the soul bring with it the notion of responsibility or culpability for one's actions, it brings with it all the other notions that go along with it: guilt, pride, and the one drive that Walt seems to wrestle with in his new career as meth manufacturer. That is, the desire for a clean conscience, relief from the guilt he feels for his actions. In a word, redemption. And materialism is important here because of what's going on in Mexico right now. Thousands of Guatemalans, El Salvadorans, and Hondurans are on their way, allegedly on their way to the southern border of the United States to ostensibly gain entry into this country and become green card holders, if not citizens. Now, this whole action is based on materialism. It is the idea that a border is merely a word or a concept, and that the concepts and anything that is not physical, a word or a concept, it's not something you can touch or feel, is the point I'm trying to make. A border is not something you can touch or feel. It is just an imaginary construct. But what's real are the people that are approaching this so-called border. and that's all that matters. But it's not true. A border is, again, a delineation of property. Property is a concept, border is a concept, but they are just as real as the people, those people themselves. And if you don't think so, number one, why are they carrying flags? And number two, try taking something from them. Go up to one of them, stick your hand in their pockets, and take whatever they have in terms of their pockets, whether it's money or other types of possessions that they may have brought with them, and see how they react. Do they just go stumbling along, or do they react? Do they try to stop you? So that's very often the way, and materialism and a lot of these other so-called theories are really, when you get right down to it, rationalizations. They're lies. They're what people put up to rationalize their behavior. Border is just a word. Doesn't really mean anything because it's not something you can touch or feel until you go ahead and violate somebody else's property or property rights, to take property from them, and then you get, of course, them screaming for justice, which is another concept. And materialists, in particular on the left, attacking concepts undermine things like the rule of law, justice. And that's the threat there. That's why you don't want to ape the left and also join them in this materialistic mistake or error. You don't want to do that. You want to remember that concepts are as real as people. Okay, so back in a minute. Welcome back. Thank you very much. And I'm going to close with a couple of jokes from the New York City Cab Driver's Joke Book. Jim Peach, a real New York City cabbie, has heard them all, from business people, unemployed laborers, Wall Street lawyers, prostitutes, writers, tourists, drug dealers, and lovers, all from the back seat of his cab as he makes his way around New York City. Jim always asks his customers for their best jokes, and here are his favorites. More than 400 clean jokes, dirty jokes, ethnic jokes, religious jokes, dirty Ernie jokes, jokes about musicians, bartenders, hookers, everyone. The New York City Cab Driver's Joke Book also includes true stories about Jim's writers and original illustrations by Jim himself, the cabbie with the best collection of jokes in New York City. A guy is driving down the road in Italy on his way to Salerno. By the roadside, he sees a car broken down with a man and a woman standing beside it. He pulls over and gets out of his car to see if he can help. Suddenly, the man pulls a gun on him. "All right, buddy," says the man, "I want you to jerk off." "What?" he says. "Go ahead, do it," says the man, holding the gun to the guy's head. So the guy masturbates, and when he's through, he says, "All right, can I go now?" "No, I want you to do it again," says the man. "Again?" the man exclaims. "I just did it." "Do it again." So he does it again. It takes him a little longer this time, but when he is finished, he says, "Now can I leave?" "One more time. I want you to do it again." The guy's really scared now. He's starting to sweat. It takes him quite a long time, but finally he comes a third time. "Now can I leave?" "Yeah," says the man, lowering his gun. "And this is my sister. I want you to drive her into Salerno." Question: what is 6 inches long that women love? Answer: money. And on that note, we conclude another episode of The Drill. I thank you for listening, and until next time, have a great day.